and welcome to episode 17 of the Retreadcast, the regular video podcast series for the tyre retreading industry. As usual, I'm joined by my father, David Wilson, the publisher of Retreading Business. Hi there, David. What's the plan for today's podcast?
Thank you, Richard. Well, today we'll be going over to the United States to talk to Roy Littlefield, the CEO of the Tyre Industry Association, on the occasion of the association's 100th anniversary. Roy has been with TIA for over 40 years, which is longer than I've been in the industry. I remember talking to Roy when we were pitching the launch of Retreading Business back in 1997. So at a time when we're looking forward to our 100th issue next spring, I was delighted to be able to talk to Roy about his association's Centenary and their aspirations for the future.
Well, we certainly offer our congratulations to TIA on their centenary, and our thanks also go to Dave Zelasco for setting up this interview. So why wait any longer? Let's go over to that interview with Roy Littlefield right now.
On this issue of the Retreadcast, we're going over to the US to talk to Roy Littlefield, who is Chief Executive Officer of the Tyre Industry Association. This year, TIA are celebrating their centenary, so we're very pleased to be able to speak to Roy about the association's achievements over the years and TIA's plans for the future. Good morning, Roy, and welcome to the Retreadcast.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk to you today in celebration and recognition of the 100th anniversary of the Tyre Industry Association, which is an amazing achievement. For the benefit of our readers and viewers around the world, many of whom may not be fully aware of what TIA is and does, perhaps you can start by giving us a brief background into the history of the association and an insight into how its development into the modern association that it is today.
Great. Well, 100 years ago, the country was going through a lot of changes, both politically and we came off the Industrial Revolution, and we had new industries like the automotive industry, and that brought in issues such as tires and whether there should be controls, regulations, relationships with the tire manufacturers, with the government officials. And so 100 years ago, 500 dealers got together in Chicago and started talking about it. At that time, Teddy Roosevelt was very popular in American politics, and he was pushing for associations so that small businesses would have an equal say in industry decisions. So he was encouraging that. And so you had initially some city and state associations starting up before a national association. And then 500 dealers showed up in Chicago in 1920 and said, let's try to do something on a national level. And it's interesting because when you go back in time, it wasn't a tire dealer like we picture them today, a tire dealer or a retreader. Back then, they were coming from blacksmiths, general stores, livery stations, carriage shops, and dozens of other less likely occupations. And they were all just selling tires. So the industry was much different back then. And these dealers came together and talked about forming a national group that could speak to both consumers and to tire manufacturers and to decision makers, whether it be on the city, state, or national level. So it's a fascinating background, and they came together. They didn't have a whole lot of money. They didn't have a whole lot of experience. They didn't have anything to build on as far as what would work and what wouldn't work, because it was all just new territory. And when you go back in American history, a lot of associations started back around 100 years ago. Not and many have lasted the whole 100 years, and many have changed in different ways. And we've certainly changed a lot over the years. We've gone through periods where there was membership problems, financial problems, convention problems. Then we had the American Retreaders Association, a splinter group, with people who used to work for the National Tire Dealers and Retreaders Association. So then you had competing associations with competing trade shows, and all those challenges. And then at the turn of the century, the two groups came together and formed TIA. And when they came together, part of it was because there were just a lot of financial problems with both groups. And so it's been a big effort over the last 20 years to build up the training, to build up the finances, to build up relations, to improve our communications to our members and the challenges that we have with that. So we've come a long way. And I would say that right now, after 100 years, we're probably in the best shape financially and membership-wise we've been. So it's an amazing history. It's a fun history to review. One group had presidents every year. The other group had presidents that didn't have term limits. So over the 100 years, I think we've had 14 executive directors, or whatever title you want to give it. And one group had annual presidents, and the other group had presidents that were on sometimes 4 or 5 years.
That sounds like an excellent story, and it's certainly something we'd be looking to cover in some detail in the magazine. So tell me, what would you consider to be the biggest achievements of the association over the years?
Well, I think, we say in our mission statements that our two primary efforts are training and government affairs. In the training department, we really made it much more professional over the last 25 years. We have programs, as you know, from everything from industrial tires to passenger tires to truck tires. We have trained in the last 2 decades over 200,000 technicians. I think that's been very important for the safety of the industry, and also to keep insurance costs down. And those are programs that we have. And I would think that the other area that we're strong in is government affairs, and what we have done over the years to protect our members and to continue to try to protect them from issues ranging from, this week we have a hearing on the situation of salmon on the West Coast, where the argument is that tires are producing are made with a chemical that's ending up in the water and killing salmon. And so that gets into the whole issue of, if that's true, and there's only been one study on it, what does that do to asphalt rubber? What does that do to that asphalt rubber that ends up either in the roads or in athletic fields? Are you looking at making used tires a hazardous waste? The tremendous liability on the industry if something like that happens, and the cost of cleaning up these fields. So every little thing that comes up is a big deal, and you need to have that voice. This week, President Biden signed a couple of executive orders that are really supportive of the industry, and one of them is an executive order supporting the right to repair. A lot of our members who maybe 50 years ago were not really in automotive service, now that's a very big part of their business. Is the service stations in this country went from service bays to convenience stores. And it became a new profit center for tire dealers who already had the car counts. So that was a very positive thing. And now the president's coming out and talking about that we have to protect the independent repair facilities from efforts by the automobile manufacturers and automobile dealers to almost require consumers to go back to the automobile dealers to have their cars serviced. So, we've had a couple of very successful efforts on the state level, and now the president signed an executive order, and he's urging the Federal Trade Commission to draft legislation to protect dealers. And we're going to have a meeting tomorrow with the Federal Trade Commission on this very new development. So there's always been a need for dealers to come together and have a voice, and that need continues today.
Okay, so what would you say are the main challenges for industry associations like TIA going forward?
Well, certainly one of them is technology. In a very fast changing industry, the technology that dealers need in their facilities to function, the technology that the association needs to be able to effectively and to get information out to dealers in a very timely manner. That certainly is something that we struggle with. Right now, Dave's Alasko's working on trying to upgrade our website, and it's expensive, and it changes so quickly. How do you keep current? And so that's a big challenge for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more on that one. So let's move on to the one topic that I've asked absolutely everybody I've interviewed this year, and that is with regards to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I wanted to ask you what in your experience, the effects have been of the pandemic on the US market, and what has the association been able to do on behalf of its members to mitigate those impacts?
Well, our experience probably is similar to that in Great Britain and certainly other countries as well. When the pandemic first hit, the first thing we as an association did was move on a state and federal level to have our members defined as members that were crucial to so that our members wouldn't have to shut down, that they would be in a protected class to be able to stay open and deal with consumers. It had a huge impact on the passenger side, much more than the commercial side, because even when things closed down, goods and food and everything had to continue to be delivered to the stores, and so the trucks stayed on the road. So the commercial dealers and the commercial retreaders did better than other segments of our industry. It was very difficult for the passenger tire dealers, the retail dealers, because people just weren't driving. Once they stopped working and they were at home, somebody who was commuting to work all of a sudden wasn't commuting to work. He was working online, if he was working at all. A lot of the associations that we deal with here closed a year and a half ago and are still working at home. The same with a lot of the government officials in Washington and a lot of the people on Capitol Hill. So people drove less, and the service bay business was really crippled. If you weren't driving and you didn't have money and you didn't know if you were going to have a job, the last thing many consumers did was think about bringing their car in for routine service. And so that was a big impact on retail dealers. As it's progressed, we're now starting to see stores open up around the country. So we're hoping we're back, to pre-pandemic days. We're not there quite yet, but we're working in that direction. We were also very influential in getting the loans, the government loans for our members to be able to utilize, and a lot of that kept a lot of them in business. One of the problems that we have a couple of problems in the industry now that are really serious. One is drivers. Our members simply cannot get drivers right now. And two, just getting people back to work, because the way it worked on the state and national levels was it became easier to get unemployment. And between the combination of the state and federal levels, in many cases, it was more money than they were making when they were working. So dealers had a hard time getting employees they had before back into their locations. And we've been working, trying to limit the unemployment benefits now so that they're not the combination that they were. But the government tried so hard to help people that it ends up putting our members now in a difficult situation, because people got used to staying home and making more money than they were in many cases working.
We'll be returning very shortly to hear the remainder of David's interview with Roy Littlefield, but first we've got an update on the key news stories from the global retreading industry. So tell me, David, where has the main activity been in the retreading industry this month?
Well, normally at this time of the year, things get fairly quiet in the retread sector, but this month there have been several stories that are worth discussing. The most important of these is the interview we carried out with Vittorio Marangoni from the Marangoni Group and Leandro Rigon from Vipal with regards to ongoing speculation in the Italian press, which suggested that the two companies were at an advanced stage of negotiations for Vipal to acquire 60% of the share capital of Marangoni SPA to be achieved by means of future capital increases.
Okay then, so what was the upshot of that?
Well, I would urge interested readers to check out the full interview on our website. But although both parties made it clear that the two companies were not on the verge of finalising a global acquisition deal, neither ruled out the issue of Vipal taking shares in Marangoni SPA via a capital increase. However, both presented a united front by emphasising that both parties were still undergoing negotiations to realise the synergies between the two companies in the most efficient way possible. I think we can expect this story to run for some time.
I think that is certainly the case. So besides that big interview you've had with Vipal and Marangoni, what else has happened this month?
Well, the other stories I wanted to briefly emphasise this month all illustrate the growing importance of the contribution that retreading makes to the circular economy. Firstly, we've seen the UK retreader Vaculug launch what it says is the world's first A-rated retread tyre. Their KT01 retread is claimed to offer a lower coefficient of rolling resistance than that required for new A-rated tyres. Next, we have Kreiberg announcing a realignment of their environmental policy in line with their overall sustainability goals. And finally, we reported that the French auto servicing network, Mobivia, which owns the Nord Auto and Midas networks in France, have announced a cooperation with the French retailer Blackstar and with the support of Bridgestone to create an integrated tyre recycling ecosystem, including a retread plant at the site of Bridgestone's former tyre factory in Bethune, France. And that brings us neatly back onto the subject of centenaries, as Blackstar featured in the very first edition of Retreading Business 98 issues ago.
That's right. I remember reading about the proactive marketing activities of Blackstar and their founder, Alan Rosier, in the early issues of Retreading Business and in the magazine's predecessor, the European Retreading Review. So just a reminder that all these stories can be read in full on our website at retreadingbusiness.com. But now let's return to that interview with Roy Littlefield.
Okay, so let's go on to talk about the association's future plans. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about what TIA's key plans for the future are in terms of programs and member services.
Well, I think that we're taking a very serious look at member services, and one of the ones that we are trying to respond to is the members' need for health insurance. Our members, more than most associations with small business members, really try to give their employees health insurance benefits. And I started with the association back in 1979, and in those days, the health insurance programs really carried a lot of associations financially. And what happened with Obamacare and some of the other developments on the federal level was that a lot of the protections that associations had for their programs was lost, and states came in under reform and limited, how much money an association could make out of them. And it really got to a point where most of the association programs were lost. And when we go to state conventions and there's a roundtable discussion or something about what are your most important issues, health insurance always comes out near the top because it's costing our members so much money. So that is something that we're really trying to address. We have a new program. We're trying to market it now. But that's a serious issue for us. And I think that, you always have the issues of people buying other people out, of businesses coming together. And that makes a very big challenge for our independent, smaller dealers. We have a little over 13,000 members right now, and over half of them have 3 stores or less. And it gets harder and harder to compete against these chains that just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, we have both in our association, but we recognize that that's a very serious need for half of our, and that's the core group of dealers that have been around for the 100 years with us. So we certainly want to protect them and do what we can in education and programs, and a lot of them are in buying groups. You know, there's a lot of different ways that they can address that, but that's a major issue for us. And as I said, the technology in a changing society, in a changing industry, that's a high priority for us. Conventions, trade shows, everything. Right now, we're finding, and we have 27 state or regional associations, we're finding that those associations are in much more dire straits financially than the national. And I think that's pretty much across the board in the United States. Social media has helped national associations a lot. And for state associations, it's hurting them because they don't have the technology, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the money. And it's easy to compare now. You know, you want to support both the locals and the national, but a lot of times the state groups are now more expensive than the national group is. And through social media, you're seeing that maybe you're not getting as much benefit as you might be from a national group. So that's something that we've got to work on, because we're going to lose a lot of these state groups. A lot of associations in different industries are looking at this problem, because you have to have a voice on the state level too. What we've learned in Right to Repair and some of the other issues that we've supported is sometimes it's easier to pass a bill in one state than it is to pass it on the federal level, especially for a dealer group, if it's a state group that's effective. And once you open the door in one state, you can't really stop information from going over the state lines. So it changes everything. And we've had issues in some states recently on the asphalt rubber in athletic fields, and whether or not that is actually causing cancer or not. And the issue becomes that if one state passes that and it becomes a hazardous waste, I mean, then it's going to sweep around the country, and you're going to have a problem with cleaning up these fields. What are you going to do with all the rubber that's in them now? How are you going to dispose of that? The liability on the tire manufacturers will be overwhelming, because everybody who has cancer is going to say, well, I played, a soccer game on that field or something, and that's part of the reason I got sick. So that's those issues on one state, maybe just one or two states have it one year, but if it passes in those one or two states, it's incredibly important. So you've got to have strong representation on the state level as well as the national level.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to talk about the Centenary activities now. You've got a substantial programme of events scheduled for the SEMA show in November. Perhaps you could talk us through some of the activities and events that you've got planned.
We had some really exciting events planned for the 100th anniversary, which kind of have gotten delayed now because of the pandemic and the whole COVID situation. We want to have another lobby day in Washington, D.C. We have a new administration. We'd like to try to get into the White House. We'd like to get into the Small Business Administration. We want to have our day on Capitol Hill, going from office to office. That's not the only time that we're up on Capitol Hill, but it's one time that we bring in people from around the country. So it can make a big difference where we can make a statement for the industry. That keeps getting postponed, and now we're looking at the spring of 2022, because right now, if you had a lobby day in Washington, I don't know who you would meet with. A A lot of the congressional offices are still closed. If you go down there, you can't go to an office unless they come down and escort you up. And when you get up there, there might not be very many people there. And unfortunately, Washington looks almost like a war zone. You know, since we had that situation in the Capitol in January, you still have, you know, barriers up downtown. It's not attractive right now. We also want to have an environmental summit in conjunction with the lobby day, maybe the day before, the day after. We want to do that at the Environmental Protection Agency, but you can't get into EPA right now. So all of that has to be postponed. And then in the show in Vegas, we want to have an international summit. And this really came out of the BIPOBR meetings that, you know, we see you at between Cologne and Bologna, because what we've discovered is a lot of the issues we're looking at in this country are issues that dealers are looking at around the world. So the whole idea on that international summit was to pick some of the topics that are really important to people around the world, put together panels of dealers from around the world, some countries where they might have success in the program, another country where they might not. Tire aging is a great example. Some countries have looked at periodic motor vehicle safety inspections as a way to address tire aging and used tires and things like that. Other groups have worked with the manufacturers to try to get 10 years or whatever the manufacturer would be comfortable doing. In this country, the old RMA, Rubber Manufacturers Association, now the USTMA, the United States Tire Manufacturers Association, and they have a hard time coming to positions on things like that, because if one of the larger companies objects, then they can't go forward. So they could still have a majority going one way, but they can't get involved if one of the major companies objects. So those kind of issues we want to look at, and the way we envisioned that was it being a 2-year deal where we would have the summit, we would have the topics, we would have speakers from both speakers from government and from industry, and then dealer panels, and then having a year-long work group from each of the issues that we address in this, and then come back the next year with recommended procedures on how to move forward as a dealer community worldwide. So it's a very exciting, ambitious program that we're looking at, but looks like we're going to be delaying that a year too, because right now on the pre-registrations for the SEMA and Global Tire Expo in Las Vegas, what you have is a lot of enthusiasm from domestic dealers, domestic exhibitors. I think we're at about 1,600 companies now who are into the show. And at the height, you usually get 2,200 to 2,300 companies on the show floor. And what we're seeing is it's higher for domestic customers and really low on international. Last year at this time, we had 320 exhibitors from China, for example. This year we have none, and we're not sure how many we're gonna get, if any. We're not sure what are they gonna be able to come or not. So that is a mixed bag for everybody, because the domestic companies think that's great, and a lot of dealers are going to be looking for those companies because they want to have that offering of that tire. A lot of retreaders think it's great because those tires are not considered as retreadable. But it's going to change things a lot. So if that's the case, and because typically it's about 20-21% of the attendees are international.
Yeah.
If that's going to be way down, and we're not going to have a lot of exhibitors from the foreign countries, we're thinking that it'd be better to delay that a year rather than put it all together and then have a lot of the people we're reaching out to not be able to participate. So I think that's going to be delayed a year too. So there's still a lot of things that can happen in Vegas that are going to be exciting. We have a gala on Monday night, which Goodyear has sponsored a keynote speaker, and Bridgestone is sponsoring the entertainment. We're hoping that the manufacturers will be there. We're hoping the dealers would be there. Right now, dealer registration is up over where we were 2 years ago, but the international segment is noticeably down, and we're just not sure how that's going to play out.
Well, I have to say, I think that the problems that you're describing there with regards to international visitors at trade events is the same all around the world. The issue that you described with regards to Chinese visitors is also an issue for the European shows next year. They're in the same boat, really. Don't know what's going to happen, how many exhibitors they're going to have. So I think that this is something that's going to run for quite a while, to be quite honest. But finally, a personal question for you, Roy. You've been with TIA, as you said, since 1979, which is over 40 years. Well, what's your time with the association meant to you personally, and what did you gain from your association with the tyre industry over that time?
Well, we've all been on our own journeys, and fortunately for many of us, it's been with this great industry. And so, it becomes so much more than a job. The friendships with people like you, the reaching out, being able to work together, the opportunity to represent small business, all of that is so meaningful. And I just feel like I've been very blessed to be in this industry. And, we were doing a lot of work on our history and stuff, and there were 14 people in my position before me in either NTDRA or ARA. And right now it's hard to believe, but I've got the second longest tenure of those people. Only Bill Marsh is longer. When we think about guys like Phil Freelander and Ed Wagner, they were like giants to young guys like me at one point, and it seemed like they were there forever. And now I've been there a little bit longer, so it's kind of amazing. But it has just been a great experience. I came to Washington to go to grad school, and I wanted to work on Capitol Hill, and I walked into my senator's office from New Hampshire, where I'm from, and said, "Can I be a volunteer?" And that's how it all started. And then when it came time to move on from grad school and off the Hill, I applied to some ads in the Post, and one of them was at NTDRA, and the person who interviewed me was a guy named Russ McCleary. Russ had retired from the Motor Vehicle Manufacturers Association, and he was in charge of the Washington office. So I learned a lot from him, and about how things really work, and not the way it works in the textbook, but how it really works, and who makes the decisions, and how to enjoy life, and make it all come together. And then just having the experience with the dealers who have just been so supportive over the years. I just feel very blessed. I mean, I don't think anybody could enjoy a job more than I have enjoyed this job.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much for your time today, Roy. We really appreciate it. We wish you a fantastic centenary celebration and all the best for the future.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you soon, I hope.
Well, that's all for this edition of the Retreadcast. Many thanks to Roy for taking the time to talk to us today. We hope you found the interview as interesting as we did. Until next time, from David and myself, thanks for joining us, and please stay safe.